So for my paper, I looked at the discourse between pro-choice and anti-abortion groups during the Roe v. Wade era. I start in the mid-60s and go up right about till the end of the Roe v. Wade discussions within the Supreme Court. I also take a look at laws that were enacted following the passing of Roe v. Wade and kind of how those have affected Roe v. Wade since. One of the first key terms that we need to look at is the pro-choice or anti-abortion. I decided to use these two key terms as my kind of two sides of this debate because I feel like they most adequately explain the viewpoint of that side. But you can also call them pro-life, anti-abortion, pro-abortion, pro-life. The connotation of using anti or pro does not necessarily mean good or bad. It just kind of more allows you to kind of get a feel for how that group is feeling. For example, if you're reading a paper and the terms used were pro-life and pro-abortion, you might see that pro-life kind of in a more positive light and pro-abortion in a more negative light. So this word choice between these two groups, what they choose to define themselves as and what they choose to define their opponent as, is key in looking in this discourse. Going past this, one of the really important things that I noticed while writing my paper is that no group of people, like collectively, could be split either side. What I mean by this is that not all religious people were anti-abortion. A lot of churches did understand that in certain cases an abortion is justified, an abortion can be therapeutic, and this positive spin on the words allowed them to kind of like sidestep the moral obligations of being a church and supporting abortion. They only supported abortion in very few cases though, usually when it's cases of rape, cases of incest, or cases where carrying the child to term would pose a lot of health risks for the mother. So a lot of churches did support abortion in certain circumstances. Also, obviously a lot of churches did not support abortion in any way. The New Jersey Catholic Bishops' Conference actually issued a letter to their Capitol Hill in New Jersey where they relied on not only religious texts but also secular texts like the Declaration of Independence and the UN's Declarations to the Rights of a Child in order to show that not only was it against like a religious belief that abortion should be allowed, but also like important documents and laws. Our Declaration of Independence did not support the right to choose an abortion. So people in religious groups were on both sides of this argument. People who defined themselves as feminists were also on both sides of this argument. You obviously have NOW and NARAL, who are the National Organization for Women, and NARAL, which is the biggest pro-choice group in America, being on the side that like, yes, a woman has the right to choose if she wants to get an abortion or not, and that's a very largely feminist group. And that's kind of like their single motivation. That's one of their biggest like topics to get people involved in feminism. You also have Sydney Callahan, who is a prolific Catholic author and psychologist, who's like, the abortion debate is anti-feminist because by excluding males from the discussion, by saying it is a woman's right only to choose if she wants an abortion, that's going against everything that feminism stands for, which is the equality between sexes. And so it's kind of really interesting if you take a look through all the different groups that are involved with this. It's not clear cut. It's not one side or the other. It's not black and white. This discussion is really a big gray area, and it truly is kind of like up to yourself to decide which side of your discussion you want to be on. You have to look at your own personal beliefs and your own moral beliefs and your own like views and interpretations of the law to understand fully where you lie on this side of the debate. And so going forward from this, one of the key factors that we have to look at now is the fact that in the Supreme Court there is the June Medical Services versus Russo case, which has the power to overturn Roe v. Wade if the Supreme Court decides in favor of Russo. And so one of the main reasons I chose this topic for my paper is that in order to understand what's about to happen in the Supreme Court with June Medical Services versus Russo, we have to look at what happened with Roe v. Wade. And we have to look at the different sides of the discussion and really analyze, like, what did they do that worked here? What are they doing right now? What's different? What's the same? What's changed? What's new? How do these differences, like, obviously they're two different cases, but they're dealing with the same subject, and this old new case has the power to overturn this old case. And so that's the next, I think that is the next step in this research, is that you have to look at June Medical Services versus Russo, and you have to look at Roe v. Wade and see what changed, what stayed the same, what worked, what didn't work. That's the next step in this discussion of the abortion discourse.